This is Melissa, and it is the 6th of July, 2025. I hope that you are doing well. It has been awfully humid here, very wet, and some of you might have been following the weather in Texas. It's not right next to me, but there's been some terrible flooding here in an area called Kerr County. It's south of here. But a lot of rain. There was some flash flooding here in the area. A lot of rain yesterday, or the day before yesterday, on the 4th. So that's the weather report. And of course, if you pay attention in your area, you probably notice a lot of spraying that can precede some of the terrible weather that we get. I am bringing you a Redux today that is Alan Watt talking with Jackie Patru on her show Sweet Liberty from July 11, 2005. And this crossed my desk today because in the Telegram Book Club channel, there's a gentleman there who lives in England, and his name is Stuart. And he has just taken it on himself to clean up audios. And I think it's great. So some of these audios, longtime listeners will know that when Alan was on different shows, sometimes the audio quality is pretty bad, and that would happen with Sweet Liberty. So this is better. I saw that he had posted a couple of cleaned up audios on the book club channel, and I took a listen to a couple of them, and to both of them that he posted yesterday. And I thought that this was an all-around good one for you to hear. There are some themes here, and I think that probably maybe the biggest theme is the doublethink of most people. That you can tell them, for instance, that fluoride is toxic, it's poisonous, and you know, it's full of metals. Would you eat a handful of metal or drink gasoline? And they'd say, oh no, I wouldn't drink gasoline, that's poisonous. And Alan said, yes, but at the same time, you can point out that fluoride is toxic, and it's in the toothpaste, and they'll still keep using the toothpaste because somebody would tell them. As he pointed out, this Brzezinski, shortly the public will be unable to think for themselves. And that is really what I think people do. We do expect the media to do our reasoning for us. And the trouble is, and this came up again today in the book club recording, which Neil Foster was talking about. Neil and I have just talked about how increasingly it's difficult. If we're looking at AI-generated, so-called news or images and video, already it's impossible to know if something is AI-generated or not. So it's always been a challenge, because the media is controlled. So there is a lot of that kind of discussion, the unwillingness of people to reason things out for themselves, or to even look up and see the sky, and you explain to them what chemtrails are or what it means to spray the sky with poison, and they may go, or they don't get it, or if they do, then they lose it and they can't retain it. This was one thing that Alan observed over the years, is that you can tell people amazing things, mind-blowing things, exciting or discouraging information. And they may really latch onto it that day, go, whoa, wow, that's amazing, or that's just awful, or I can't, wow. But even the next day, it isn't in their mind at all. So they had a good conversation about the chemtrails, and Jackie said she looked up, and her first exposure to a chemtrail She'd heard about them, she'd had pictures sent, but when she saw it for herself, they were laying down an X in the sky. And it reminded me, I had a real history with Sigrid from Lithuania, who works a good portion of the year in Switzerland. And she had sent me a bunch of photographs that she had taken of chemtrails that she saw and photographed in Switzerland. And I had a whole folder full of them, chemtrails 2017 to 2023. And I think I used at least one of them to illustrate our talk. But she had sent me these 2 perfect photographs, and I didn't want to use them to illustrate the conversation that I had with her because we didn't talk about it. And I thought, well, it'll just be an image that gets wasted. We don't mention it. It isn't discussed. But there it is, 2 perfect images that she sent me of the sky with a 5-pointed star chemtrail. Now, pilots don't fly in a 5-pointed star pattern, you understand? So we're given all kinds of explanations. We're told we have new clouds that we're looking at, and it's just residual. It's the contrail, and they last longer, etc., etc. And one thing that Alan mused before was we lived in Estera outside of Sudbury, and I looked up one time to see how many flights came in and out of Sudbury, from Toronto, or, bigger flights. And it wasn't that many. And if you add into that the smaller airports in the region, but if you took all of the air traffic in that area, there is just simply no way that you could account for the trails in the sky by the amount of traffic that we're told was in the area. And I think you could probably do that in your area if you don't live in a huge city. If I know where I live, I am many, many miles away. I'm more than an hour away from a major airport. And yes, there's smaller air traffic around smaller airports, but again, the air traffic in my area cannot account for the amount of trails that I see day in and day out. And I can tell you, if I ever saw a 5-pointed star in the sky, if I, made out of chemtrail, there's just no way that you could tell me that that's how pilots fly. But that's what we get. That is what we're given. So I'm going to use Sigrid's photographs and just show you those. But I read the transcript for this talk. I listened to it, and there were a lot of things I just got lost. I mean, it's late Saturday night, very late, because I got lost today just looking at all of the things that they talked about and winding in and out of, digressing and wasting time. I think I must like to do that. And there was a point, it was interesting to me, it caught my attention, when they were discussing the politicians and royalty as figureheads, who's who's at the top and what do they know and are they in on it and did they sign off on it and why would they do this? And this was around the death of Princess Diana, or Lady Di. And Alan just said, it was absolutely in your face. This was, she was taken out. She was taken out. And of course, there are so many conspiracy theories around that act, the death of Princess Diana, Lady Di. To the point that they had to have, an operation. I think it was called Operation pageant. And that, of course, was, the Metropolitan Police were asked to investigate all of these different conspiracy theories. And, of course, they concluded it was an accident. I never really paid that much attention to the conspiracy angle of her death, because I guess I just don't go there with most things, because I want to start from the point they're never going to tell us the truth. The things that are put out there for us to speculate about have probably been put out there for us to speculate about, and we can we can go down one so-called rabbit hole after another, and we'll never know. We'll never know. So it's never been how I choose to spend my time. But just to say that it's a given, we're not told the truth. So Alan said, yes, there are all kinds of things that are totally in your face. Public never sees it, never figure it out. And most of the people that we call our leaders, elected or even royals, are figureheads. They're puppets. And Alan said something about a pharaoh. He said, there in 200 BC, there was a pharaoh in Egypt. You found out that he was not the boss. And he was surrounded by priests who decided that what he would see, who he would see, and who he would not see. So the priests dictated the schedule of the pharaoh. And often the pharaoh wouldn't even know that people had come to talk to him. And Jackie said, was that Tootin, and what was his name? And Alan said, no, long before him. And he actually tried to jump out the window to meet people that he saw had been turned away by the priests to find out what they were there to see him for. The priests were always in control, and it's no different today. It doesn't mean that these elite people are not part of certain bloodlines, and they're very pompous, and they truly believe they are superior. They do believe they are superior, but they are not the ones that sit and plan all this. This is planned by strategical think tanks. And of course, back in the pharaoh's time, maybe they would have been think pyramids, but they were. So anyway, I got waylaid by this because I never talked to Alan about that. I don't know who the pharaoh was. And I'm like, okay, he said 200 BC. So I start digging into it. A pharaoh who jumped out a window. And the very first thing that I came up with was a website called jumplikeapharaoh.com. And here it is, Jump Like a Pharaoh, Volume 8. And Volume 8 is happening 26 to 31 October 2025, and the registration is open. You can fly like a pharaoh. The last and only standing seventh wonder of the world, a 4,500-year-old relic that will give you shivers standing next to it. You will feel its energy and awe. You will wonder how it was built. The question is, why visit it like a tourist when you can fly around it like a pharaoh? And that's what you can do. They'll fly you up and you can jump. And I just had to spend the next 2 or 3 hours watching these jumping videos and looking at all these skydiving people and some of their videos. And I don't know. It was something to do that beat buckling down and doing anything that you might call important. One of the reasons I think I do stall like I do is because it's interesting. Sometimes it's just boring to try to figure out what other people are talking about, or what I think that, maybe I should or shouldn't talk about, or what's important. And so I just have to go with, what is hitting me at the time. And I have to tell you that so much what was on my mind really is how terrible this flood is in Texas, and there's a lot of death around it, and it has a lot of children have died. They were at their summer camp and they died in the flood. And right now, as of now, more than 50 people are dead, and there are still many missing people. So it said that 24 girls from a camp on the Guadalupe River are unaccounted for. And it's very terrible. So they had this flood that just came on. The water rose very quickly, and it's a devastation. It said the search for those who were swept away by devastating floods in central Texas grew increasingly desperate as the death toll jumped to 52 on Saturday night, and the likelihood of finding more survivors appeared to diminish. In Kerr County, where waterways gorged by thunderstorms tore through a Christian girls' camp, trapped families inside trailer homes, and swept people into the currents, the authorities said that some 24 campers remained unaccounted for, and that there was no cap to the broader tally of the missing. That means a lot of people are missing, and there could be many, many more deaths. State and local officials said the search was now a race against time, but they refused to relinquish their hope that more survivors would be found. And I was just reading parts of this because as I was looking at some old things around the death of Lady Di, and I saw that, at least we're told, that her funeral was viewed by 2.5 billion people. I saw that I was reminded of a little time capsule I made for Substack yesterday, where Alan is talking about how, when all of these people during the very, very early days of COVID were supposedly dying on cruise ships and trapped, and, we're in this early kind of crisis that is being presented to us from the media. The thing that people were most interested in was the death of a host of a reality show. Her name was Caroline Fleck. And he said people are just riveted to this. I've never heard of the woman, but, it's just captured people's imagination. And I wondered, what are the most viewed live events in the history of television? And there's such records kept, people will know, in the world of television, they're going to have an instant idea of the viewership of something and how many people watched in the first quarter hour and how many people watched in the second half hour, and were they in the 18 to 21 demographic or the 20 to 24 demographic, etc. So, but they can only give you roughs on these, but it would appear that the two most watched live events in history were the funeral of Lady Di and the memorial service for Michael Jackson. And there was something about that made me sad, because I didn't know Michael Jackson and I didn't know Princess Diana. And really, they had no impact on my life. And isn't that how it is for most of us? We don't pay that much attention to the events around us, even looking up in the sky, but we will know so much, as Alan would say, trivia. And so I looked at some of these victims, and it was just very sad, and I'll just share a few names. There was a man named Brian Eads. He was 52. He said he was searching for news of his wife, Catherine, at an emergency shelter yesterday. And then he said in a brief phone call today that she had died. He said, "We both got swept away, and then I lost her. He survived by clinging to a tree. Bobby Martin, 46, and his wife Amanda Martin of Odessa were among those killed in the flooding, according to Bobby Martin's father, John Keith Martin. The couple was camping by the Guadalupe River when their RV was swept away. He was an adventurous man, adventurous and outgoing. And then it talked about this camp, Mystic Camp, a Christian summer camp for girls along the Guadalupe River. And it said there were about 750 girls at the camp this week. And the camp said it was assisting with search and rescue operations, but it did not have power, water, or Wi-Fi, and it was struggling to get more help because a nearby highway had washed away. The camp has 2 sites along the river near Hunt, Texas. On social media and in text messages, parents circulated photos of some of the missing girls and exchanged hopeful stories that they were hearing about dramatic rescues, girls clinging to trees or floating downriver to a boys' camp 5 miles away. Camp Mystic aims to provide young girls with a wholesome Christian atmosphere in which they can develop outstanding personal qualities and self-esteem. The camp was established in 1926 and has been run by generations of the same family since the 1930s. Camp activities include archery, cooking, cheerleading, fishing, and a variety of sports. And it took me back to summer camp days because I did get to go to summer camp a few times when I was a young girl, and I got to do archery and canoeing and swimming and leather working, and it was so much fun. I loved it. And it just was pretty heartbreaking to me to put myself in the mind of a mother or a father who lost a little girl there. I can't even imagine it. I really can't. It's not something that I do that often because anywhere we look, right? If it's Gaza or if it's something in your own backyard, the pain and suffering is something that you kind of have to have some kind of a wall around it, a wall that separates you from that, or you'd be ragged all the time. So I took a walk. I just got up from the computer and decided to head out on a walk before it got dark. I decided not to go very far, and then as I was coming back up towards the house, I walked a couple of blocks away, and I went on a street that I don't often go. It's not my everyday route. And as I was passing a house, I wondered how the man was that lived in that house, because I knew that his wife had died about 1.5 years ago. And it's the 6 degrees of separation, and I wouldn't, he's not a friend, but I have met him. And I just wondered how he was doing. And I walked past his house, and about 2 or 3 houses past his house, I saw him walking down the street in the opposite direction from me. So I was headed away from his house, and he was headed home. And I said, "Hi, Terry." And I waved at him. And I knew that he recognized my face, but he didn't. I didn't want to make him feel awkward because I didn't expect him to remember my name. And I reminded him of my name. And then, of course, he knew who I was, and he came over. And I said, I was just thinking about you and wondering how you were doing. And I often think of you whenever I pass by the house. And, he said, well, some things just don't ever really get that much better. And then we proceeded to talk for quite a while. And what was really happening on the street was that he wanted to talk to me, and he talked to me about all kinds of people that I'd never heard of. There were a few in there that I could vaguely remember a name from my childhood, And none of it really meant anything to me. There was nothing for me to latch on to. And at one point he said, "Oh, I'm sorry for the trivia." And I said, No, it's good. But he just kept talking. And I knew what was going on, was that he was very lonely. And probably nobody stops and talks and asks him how he's doing. And it's awkward, and that's how we do, and you're on your social media, and it's enough just to go, "Oh, well, I saw it posted on Facebook," and then blah blah blah, and you're on about your own life. And I just felt, I could feel it, like I was that kind of oasis of humanity. And so I just planted my feet on the street and stood there and listened to him talk. And at one point, I could just feel that almost wanting to cry come up inside of me for no other reason but the intensity of his loneliness nearly overwhelmed me. And then eventually I said that I needed to get my cats in before it grew dark. And he had told me he was off on a little bit of a road trip to Oklahoma and what he was going to do and so forth. And he was considering taking his cat. And I don't know why I told you that. I think it just has to do with, we spend an awful lot of time looking at things that don't matter, that don't affect us, that aren't in our neighborhood, that are almost unreal. And there is something about putting a foot onto the ground, onto your ground, that is grounding. And this isn't something that came up in Alan's talk with Jackie, but it did come up in the interview that we covered, Waiting for the Miracle, that Neil Foster covered in a pre-recorded thing that we played and discussed. And that was a section on page 72 of Waiting for the Miracle. And Jackie was talking about how she had talked to Bill Cooper once, and he was saying something about how Revelation was, people just say it's God's will, it's a cop-out, and of course that's what Alan would say too. Jackie said, it's a real cop-out to accept this evil as God's plan. And Alan said, yes, let's just walk into the gas chambers when we're told. I think I mentioned to you once, I have a book here on all the religious sects in America, and it was printed in 1920, and I don't know what that book is, but he mentioned it here. At the end, they summarize Christianity with a minister giving the summary. Then the author asks, what is Christianity? And he answers, it's a belief in Jesus Christ, of a revelation, a resurrection, and the afterlife. He summed it up that way. Revelation, resurrection, afterlife. Then he asked a Jewish rabbi, and the Jewish rabbi really pointed out something important. He said, you Christians left your cause when the church came into being. You left the cause. We Jews are active. Judaism is an active religion. That will always stay in my memory, because that attitude of just obey, obey, sit back and obey and be good little boys. So he's saying, he's reminding us that Jewish people have said that they were an active religion. And I know that stuck in his mind because he mentioned that to me more than a time or two. And so when I saw this headline in the Jerusalem Post from today, today, July 6th, it is the 6th that I'm putting this up. Israel's war doctrine is ancient wisdom wrapped in modern warfare. This is an opinion piece. Israel's willingness to act decisively and preemptively is sometimes misunderstood by outsiders, but rarely questioned within the Jewish world. History rarely gives the Jewish people a break. From the moment Abraham left Ur to the latest headlines out of the Middle East, survival has been a full-time job. Call it fate, bad luck, divine testing, or just geography. Still, no matter the reason, the Jewish people have learned, often the hard way, that endurance is not optional. It's existential. I'll post this and you can read it yourselves, but it is interesting. So I just skipped a few paragraphs. He carries on. The world sees advanced weaponry and intelligence coups. Jews see the latest chapter in a saga that began long before anyone ever said Mossad. What happened in Iran was not just a military operation, it was the logical outcome of a culture that spent centuries learning how to endure against overwhelming odds. For Jews, survival is not a passive state. It's deliberate, active, sometimes desperate, and always creative. When you've been forced to reinvent yourself in Babylon, in Spain, in Russia, in America, you pick up some tricks. Adaptability becomes second nature. So, yeah, there it is. It's active. It is active. And that is one of the things that Alan did a lot with Jackie Patru's. And very much so in the Waiting for the Miracle set of interviews, but also in other interviews. He is showing, specifically in that region of the world, that religion, no less than all of the others, was created and given to a people for a purpose and a time. And these people who have been indoctrinated with their religion, they actively work it into being. They keep it going. So I think that's about it. I just a little bit more reflective on maybe for me, it's more and more interesting to be interior looking, or looking at the bigger picture or the bird's eye view, or things from a different angle, and not always the expected angle or what I might think for a moment that I should do. I was thinking a couple of days ago that Alan had set a time or two on talks. He went and once said to a caller, you know, it's funny that they say, you know, if, as they say, the kingdom of heaven is inside, it's the last place that people want to look. And the caller that he was talking with just kind of skipped right over that nugget, and went on to the next thing. It didn't register at all, but it registers with me. I think about it a lot. And someone in Telegram had posted a song yesterday, and it was called Exit Inside. And I listened to it, and then I looked the lyrics up, and it said, you're running round and round and round, and where are you going to go? Where are you going to hide when the exit is inside? And then I looked up the band that did Exit Inside. They're called the Angel Sea. It says they're inspired by reggae and cabaret. This Tel Aviv band rocks. The Angel Sea, a 6-piece internationally touring ensemble, won a Creator Award for Performing Arts in Jerusalem. You can tell right away that the Angel Sea isn't your usual rock band. The Tel Aviv-based group plays an unusual assortment of instruments, including a fife, a ukulele, and a toy guitar. There are 2 drummers, but they perform on a single drum set and only use their hands. They don't stand in a straight line. We stand in a half circle to see each other. That's very interesting. You have to look up the half circle. That is the Nasi, the Sanhedrin. Anyway, the words, no matter what, no matter who, you're running round and round and round. And where are you going to run to? Where are you going to hide when the exit is inside? Exit inside when life itself is a dying moment. And I thought that's just so true. You know, the way that Alan said it to me is, wherever you go, there you are. Wherever you go, there you are. It's a simple, trite little thing almost, but it's just so true. We've got the keys to so much more than we ever stop and acknowledge, because we're so busy looking out there, maybe watching the funeral with 2.5 billion other people of somebody that we never met, never knew. And we miss what's around us, what's next door, what's in the sky. Well, I hope that you all have a really good week, and I thank you for your support. If you haven't gone over to see Cutting Through the Matrix at Substack.com, it's cuttingthroughthematrix.substack.com. And there are other ways that you can support what I'm doing and keep it going, and I appreciate it, and you take care. Have a good week.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Alan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, yeah.
Did you just hear a beep?
Yeah. I think you're on, though.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight on Sweet Liberty. It is Monday, and the date is the 11th. Alan?
It is, yeah.
Yes, it is the 11th of July, folks, in the year 2005. I can usually remember the year, Alan.
Yes, that's a good sign.
Dates just absolutely, totally escape me. And, folks, well, let me first, share our spiritual message. And this is from A Course in Miracles, and I will get off this. Some of these, statements are very meaningful for me, and I thought maybe they would be for you. It's A Course in Miracles. It says, there is a place in you where there is perfect peace. There is a place in you where nothing is impossible. There is a place in you where the strength of God abides. That would be the strength of Creator, wouldn't it, folks? And we have Alan Watt with us tonight. I was out in the garden until 8:30, and certainly not prepared. And Alan always is so gracious and kindly agreed to come on with us. And we didn't really have anything set. Well, we don't normally anyway, I guess, do we, Alan?
That's right, yeah.
Except sometimes I say, well, I'd like to talk about that.
Uh-huh.
And what I'd like to talk about right now is you're in northern Canada, and your temperature today was 111 degrees.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, 111. And it stayed there for hours. And it only started cooled down about an hour ago. And it's down to about 86 right now.
Oh, well, that's a
apparently
blessing.
They had emergency stations opened up in some cities called cooling centers, where they'd rush people to get cooled down, you know. Yeah.
And you don't know if they're claiming that records have been set, huh? You know, you're in
haven't said anything so far as I know.
Well, do you know if temperatures like this in the area where you are, I mean, were they at one time common or normal, Alan?
No, this is not normal at all. And especially further north. I mean, these temperatures should be should be close to the equator, but not this far north. Yeah. Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would think that you would probably have at the most days in the 80s and probably cool evenings. I mean, you know, that's the way it used to be here. Mm-hmm. Well, when we moved here 10 years ago, we would have, it could be a very beautiful, maybe, 80, 85 degrees. go down to 55 at night.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful sleeping weather, but to have 111 degree, that's like out in Death Valley. Is that Death Valley?
On top of that. Yeah.
With humidity, yes.
Yeah.
So that has to, is there a formula for figuring out, well, I suppose there is. If the temperature is 110 and the humidity is like, 70%?
Yeah.
Figuring out the actual heat factor, Alan.
Up here you got so many lakes as well, so the more heat you get, the more evaporation into the air, and it gets terribly, terribly humid. But this is ridiculous the way it is right now. Even if you're sitting still, you're soaked, Yeah.
Wow.
But they can do wonders these days with science.
Yeah, they can, can't they?
Oh yeah, I mean they're dosing the skies with all these chemicals. Then they cause the smog, as they call it, and then they blame the public for driving and causing the smog, which is coming down from the aircraft above you. So the idea is to get everybody off the road, and the public will, because they never look up at the sky. They'll believe what they're told,
right?
And they'll say, "My God, well, it's getting warmer, and it certainly is some kind of smog.
Must be global
driving
and global warming.
Oh yeah.
And we have to be good little citizens.
Yeah.
And carpool.
Mm-hmm.
And give up our second car. Well, those.
And then eventually they'll move us in towards the cities, the habitat areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the agenda, How else do you get the public to move? You cause the problems and then you force them to move.
Yeah.
That's the standard.
You think about it, it's the same way they caused the environmental problem. Yeah. And I'll tell you when it occurred to me when we were going, I think I've mentioned this before, when Chuck and I were going to the watershed meetings, and they had the Army Corps of Engineers come out, and this one woman brought a video to show us because we had so many questions, and she wanted to answer our concerns, and they showed actual photographs of movie film of the pollution, Alan, that was coming out of the factories right directly into the rivers.
Yes.
And she said, our problem used to be point source solution, because we knew exactly where it was coming from, and we got all of our, wonderful laws passed that prohibits it, but now the problem is non-point source pollution. Well, you know what that is, Alan? It's runoff from the farmers' fields.
That's right.
And they're starting to, I won't say who this person is, but this person has 2 horses and about 40 acres for the horses to graze on.
Yeah.
And they've already been to visit this person to find out what they're going to do with that damn horse manure that's being dropped on the fields, Alan. That's it.
Well, again, this is all agenda, and it's going to get more and more ridiculous as they go along.
Well, I'll tell you one more thing that this brings to mind. I have a report here for an environmental working group out of Washington, D.C., and they discovered all kinds of toxic metals that were being put into the fertilizer that was sold to the farmers for their fields. I mean, we're talking cadmium, nickel, lead, all kinds of heavy metals, etc., because there was no congressional oversight, okay? Well, the farmers, guess what? Because there's no congressional oversight, they don't have to put on the bags. There was arsenic in it and that kind of stuff. They don't have to put on the bags that these ingredients are in the fertilizer. So the farmers put this fertilizer on the fields, and then they get the farmers for polluting the streams with these toxic metals, Alan.
Sure they do. Well, everything's a setup because everything's a plan, and they must make the plan come to fruition by causing the problems. And so they are responsible for it in the first place, just like they're responsible for spraying the skies on a daily basis and at night as well, So the stuff is coming down. It's in the rainwater. It's in the snow, even in the winter time, and of course they can also cause this intense refraction of sunlight. Once you have the air saturated with metallic particles, billions and billions and trillions of tiny metallic particles, they act like mirrors, you see, and they reflect the light back and forth all the time. So it simply doesn't hit the Earth or bounce back and go into outer space. It's bouncing through all these mirrors, and this is causing the warming effect. And this has been noticed in previous years when they've been spraying heavily.
Wow.
So they cause the problem, sure, and then they blame the public for causing it. And unfortunately, it works pretty well because the public never look up at the sky.
I know, my new neighbor going to be across the road, Donnie, was out brush hogging tonight, stopped, and we chatted a bit before I came in. And we happened to be standing out there, and they happened to be chemtrailing us.
Mm-hmm.
And I had talked to Donnie about this before, but you could tell it just didn't gel, Alan.
Yeah.
And I said, look it up there. There's chemtrail, Donnie. And he looked up. He says, yep, uh-huh. Alan.
Oh, yeah.
And then there were two more over towards the west.
Uh-huh.
And I started just talking to him about it when I said I got some emails about this.
Uh-huh.
And that was way back then, wasn't it, Alan?
It was.
And I was reading it, and I didn't disbelieve it, but I needed some proof. And then I got calls from friends. A call from a friend in Ohio. Her husband is a doctor. She said, Jackie, I don't know what's going on in the sky,
mm-hmm.
but she said, you ought to see they've been putting these lines down and they're puffing up. And she said, everybody is sick. And I said, oh my, well, I'm going to fax you or email you some information that I have. 3 days later, I get a call from a friend in Denver. She told me the same thing. She said they've been laying these trails north and south for half the day, and then they turned them east and west. She said there's a perfect checkerboard up there. Yeah. And she said everybody's windows have this greasy like film on it, car windows, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So Al and I started talking about it, and I am telling you, I got calls from all over the country. Yeah. All over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never seen them. But I was telling Donnie all this. And so he was listening to me because it was my awakening, so to speak. And I said, I was telling our listeners, I was doing the broadcast at 6 p.m. at the time. And whenever this happened, the sun was beginning to set over there in the west, and I could see it out the door from my studio. Mm-hmm. And at that night, I was saying, well, I've never seen a chemtrail. See, we live in the country. And I happened to look up, and there was a perfect X in the sky, Alan.
Yeah.
And I watched the plane putting the underline under the X. That was my first experience actually seeing one of these things, although I have lots of photographs that listeners have sent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Joe Average can see them for himself if he wants to just look up once in a while. Because they're doing it everywhere.
No, they don't, honey, they don't see it when they look up, Alan.
Well, yeah.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
I told you this, I believe, that when, the children know what chemtrails are, my grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. And
Jody was telling me that she and Ashley's boyfriend were outside one day. And Jody looked up, and there they were, laying the chemtrails. And she said, look up there, Ash. And Ash said, oh, my God, Momo would be having fits right now. Mm-hmm. And her boyfriend said, what? She said, well, look up there. And he looked up. He said, what? And then she had to explain to him what the hell he was, excuse my language, what he was seeing, Alan.
Yeah.
He looked up and said, what?
Yeah, I've seen it, even at a local Philips station, and right above the sky, there's a whole, it was a mess. It was a mess of trails, and they were still laying them. And I just mentioned it to the guy that was filling the tank in the vehicle, and he just casually glanced up, and it didn't penetrate.
No, well, see, that's what I saw happen with Donnie. And I proceeded to go through this little story to him, and then he went, huh. I said, just watch it, Donnie. Watch it pop up. I stopped in a little plant store when I did grocery shopping last week and told the lady there about him, Alan.
See, that's what Zbigniew Brzezinski talked about in his books with the Technotronic era, which was to do with mind control for the masses. And he said that shortly the public will be unable to think for themselves. Instead, they will be downloaded with their thoughts from the previous day's news.
Oh, wow.
And that's all they'll be able to talk about. In other words, if the news does not mention something, they themselves will dismiss it if they see it. You see?
It doesn't register, does it?
No. Because technically, they've got to a stage where they don't think for themselves. They expect the media is there to do the thinking for them, and will tell them what they should think about or worry about or be concerned about. So therefore, if the media doesn't mention the fact they're being sprayed, and you do, then they will ignore what you say.
Yes, exactly.
It has to come from the media.
And it's the same thing with people when you show them the poison warning on toothpaste.
Yeah.
If you swallow more than enough to brush your teeth, seek medical help or call a poison center immediately. Keep away from children under 6. We start teaching our children to brush their teeth when they get teeth, Alan.
Yeah.
And nobody reads that, but you show it to them and they just go, huh, I didn't know that. It's poison.
I know.
And you know what I was just wondering? We've talked about this on the air. I wonder if we have any listener listening to this broadcast that brushes their teeth with fluoride toothpaste. And if they do, unless you're a new listener and this is all new to you, then Alan, what would somebody do when they realize that they know this, but they're still doing it? If they realize it.
Yeah, well, it's doublethink. I mean, it's doublethink if they can know something is poisonous, but because the ads are still on TV with smiling faces and happy people, it confuses them. They can't go all the way with the fact that it's poison, because the big they, those that look after us in a socialistic system, they obviously wouldn't do that to us.
But do you think that any of our listeners think that Big Brother government is benevolent?
Unfortunately, you do have some.
Really?
Yeah, they can't quite get it, because see, ordinary people cannot imagine evil on such a grand scale being committed upon the people by agendas which your own government participates in.
Well,
I don't think there's been one politician in any Western country come out and publicly talked about the chemtrails overhead. Not one.
Well, of course they wouldn't. Of course.
And so therefore, some people, unfortunately, because they don't talk about it at all, the person who still thinks government is real becomes confused and thinks, well, if they don't talk about it, maybe it's nothing at all.
Well, what about the person that sees the poison on the toothpaste tube? It's the same thing.
They're pretty well in doublethink, as they say. They're able to hold two opposing opinions in their head at the same time about the same subject, which means technically, at least on this subject, they are psychotic.
So in other words, they could say, I know that's true, but I really don't believe it.
Yes. And yet that same person, if you said to them, drink a pint of gasoline,
they
think I'm crazy.
Yeah,
and you say, well, why don't you drink the gasoline? Because it's poison. We know that's poison.
Right.
Well, what does it say here about the fluoride? What says poison? Are you going to keep using it? Oh, yeah. So that's doublethink right there.
Yeah.
They cannot believe those smiling faces, or the authorities would allow ads on TV that would harm them. They truly believe that all business is there to be benevolent. They believe that. And that's a tragedy. Brzezinski said it, the people would give over their own ability to think and make decisions for themselves. He says they will give it over two experts and the authority. And unfortunately, people have been raised now to actually believe that that's what the media is there for, is to do their thinking and to be their watchdog for them. And of course, it never was.
Yes.
And it certainly is not now.
Because, it occurs to me, people, that, believed that, we have to go to Iraq because they have weapons of mass destruction.
Yep.
I know because I saw it on the news.
That's right.
Well, now people are beginning to realize that this was a hoax because guess what?
Yeah.
They've announced it.
Mm-hmm.
The media itself has said there were no weapons of mass destruction.
That's right.
And now they believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder how they feel about the war. Well, Saddam Hussein was a tyrant. We had to go over there and take him out.
Yeah. Well, it was on the news here when even had the inquiries into it after it was all over. And there's a panel there with George Bush on it and Colin Powell and a few others. And George Bush said at the time when he was asked the question, he said, I never said that Saddam Hussein had anything to do with 9/11.
Oh.
And that is true,
Did he really?
They left it to the media to eventually infer that Saddam Hussein was connected with it. And so he justified it by saying, the world's better off without Saddam Hussein there anyway. That was his justification.
What about Osama bin Laden?
Oh, he's all forgotten about now.
Yeah, well, you know what? I got an email, and of course, just because there's a photograph that looks like Osama bin Laden doesn't mean it's true, but that he is possibly not even alive today.
It's possible he never existed.
Well, that's the possibility too, isn't it? Although the bin Laden family it was very closely connected to the Bushes.
They've done documentaries for the CBC to show you that the Bush family and the bin Laden family were actually business partners.
Yes, they were.
In fact, the family who got the rebuilding job of the Twin Towers after the first bombing was the bin Laden construction group.
You're kidding.
But no, and that was Daddy Bush that awarded them the contract.
Oh my God.
So they're all in bed together, yeah.
But you're saying maybe, I think Osama bin Laden probably did exist. He was a CIA asset, I think. I don't know.
The thing is that
they could have just...
he took the place of Goldstein in 1984. You've always got to have a bad guy hiding that you never catch, who does all these terrible things, and with all their high-tech technology and millions of cameras and lots of need...
Wait. Okay. It took me a little bit to compute what you said. Goldstein in 1984. I was wondering who the heck Goldstein was.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize you were talking about the book, Orwell's book. And Goldstein was the terrorist, wasn't he?
Yeah, all you ever saw was him on video. You never actually saw the person. Just a figure on the video that they told you was Goldstein. That was behind all of the world's terror. And it's the same with this bin Laden. They can't find the guy. With all their equipment and millions of spies all over the world, and the fact that they've infiltrated every group you could possibly imagine. In fact, they sponsor most of them. And with all the cameras everywhere, as I say in London, they couldn't even stop these bombings.
Yeah.
No, who's kidding who?
Well, there was French newspaper that printed a story that bin Laden had been in a hospital undergoing kidney dialysis.
That's right, he was.
And that the CIA had actually been to visit him.
Yeah.
And so, maybe he didn't exist, but I think there probably was somebody. But the whole point is they just threw his name out there just like they did, what's his name, at Murrah Federal Building.
That's the same thing. Yeah.
Hell, they were announcing.
Sure, but the fact is that the bin Laden family are actually Arabic nobility. So for one to split off from the rest of his family and supposedly go in the opposite direction is almost impossible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they needed a bin Laden for that time because they already had all of those countries slated for attack back in the 1990s in the New American Century Plan.
Right.
That was set up by Cheney and Bush and Wolfowitz and a whole bunch of them. They had that in their order, that they wanted to attack Afghanistan first, then Iraq, then Iran, then Syria. And that was all first done in 1992, then it was rewritten for the New American Century Group, which is the group that the Cheney and Wolfowitz belong to. And they republished it in 1998. And sure enough, in 2001, they started the invasion right in that same sequence. So this was planned years ago.
Oh, yeah.
To take over the Middle East.
Yeah, and that brings to mind Norman Dodd, when he got into the records of the Carnegie Foundation, their minutes of their meetings. They planned, and it was probably planned well before, but maybe this was the finalization, their details, World War I. This was in 1906. And they said, well, we should probably start it in the Balkans, because that's always been a place of, unrest.
Unrest.
Yeah. And I'll be a son of a gun. But they didn't start it till after 1914, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because, and I don't know where I've read this, Alan, they didn't want to do it, have that war, until the Federal Reserve Act was passed in the U.S. so the American people could pay for the war.
That's right. It was all done to bring in world government. And that's why they wanted the League of Nations set up to be the precursor of the UN, but to bring in world government. And H.G. Wells, who worked for the British government as a propagandist, in fact, the term that he put out there, the propaganda term, was, "This is the war to end all wars." And so that was the slogan that all the troops in the world went by and died by, thinking they were going to bring in a more better world, you see.
Oh, because they thought they would get their League of Nations in at that time. That was, Woodrow Wilson was pushing that, wasn't he?
Yeah, in fact, America funded most of the meetings. And
prior to the League of Nations, they called it the League to Enforce Peace.
That's right. Yeah. And before that, it was the Concert of Europe. So they've tried this for a long time. And after World War I, H.G. Wells wrote in The Open Conspiracy, this was a non-fictional work, he said, not enough countries are willing to give up their sovereignty, so we shall have to have another world war, which they did. So everything that happens, every major occurrence which happens, is planned that way, long in advance. Everything.
And yet,
just like the New American Century in the 90s planned to establish what they call the democratic system in all the Muslim countries. So nothing happens spontaneously.
The what? Oh, the dynasty? Did you say?
Pardon?
Dynastic? Did you call it dynastic?
As I say, nothing happens by itself.
Right.
It's all planned way ahead of time, including the finances which would be involved, and even how much taxation you would need from the public to pay for it.
Yeah.
All of this is planned in strategy.
Oh, it's very clearly laid out. You talk about a controlled economy, Alan.
Oh, yeah, this is a controlled economy.
They laid it out beautifully. We have to take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with you in about a minute or a minute and a half with Alan Watt. Okay, we're back, and while we're at it, with your pen in hand, Alan has written his third book, and it is available now. If you haven't read 1 and 2, you really should do that first, because they really follow one another. Folks, for those of you who are maybe fairly new listeners, to try to imagine that everything that we have thought that we knew, everything we've been taught in history really happened, to find out that it's all a lie is really quite unbelievable. And Alan started actually coming on air with us around it was December. wasn't it, Alan, of 98? Yeah. And we did 5 weeks together. Alan pretty much blew our minds away with the ancient history. And I kept telling our listeners, I don't know that what Alan's telling us is true, because I have not done this research, and I have not read the books and know the things that he's telling us. So I kept, in a sense, warning our listeners not to take it in like it's gospel truth, but to consider it. And then I started getting mail from listeners, copies of old books, etc., and say, look, this is exactly what Alan has been telling us. And finally, Alan really didn't have a choice. Well, he did, and he made the right one, of course, but to sit down and put this in writing. But it isn't just Alan's commentary. There are photocopies of ancient books, folks, that it gets to a point where you cannot deny it as much as you would like to. And I can tell you from myself that there was a period of time where I felt that, in fact, I said this to Alan one day. I said, I feel like I'm in another world someplace, and nothing I see looks real to me. And Alan said, that's a very good place to start. And I know that is to open our minds. I don't, you can't just wash out all that garbage that's been in it, but you can replace it. You can replace it with truth, or as close as we can get to truth, because let's face it, if we aren't there, if we haven't been there ourselves, we don't actually know. But, Alan, will you forgive me for going on like this? I know
Carry on.
All right. But, folks, I remember one time I challenged him, kind of. I do that every now and then. And I asked him how many books he had read. And he said, I don't know, about 1,000. Or maybe he said thousands. I don't know. I said, well, how do you know that the books that you've read are truth? And the one thing he told me that I have noticed, folks, and I know that this is so, although I cannot prove it, of course, but when you read enough, and you read from varied authors and various histories, and there's a thread that runs through, as Alan said, you're never going to get all the truth in one book, but when you put enough of it together, there is a thread that runs through that you know that there is truth there. And so, getting back to his books, this is what he has done with book 1, 2, and 3. And book 3 is called Cutting Through. Alan, I don't remember which title the first two. Or is it?
It's okay to call it 1 and 2 and 3.
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3, because it is cutting through the BS, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And anyway, folks, each of the books are $25. That includes the postage. And as I said earlier, if you don't have 1 and 2, you would want to start there. If you have 1 and 2, you definitely will want to have number 3. And I'm going to give you Alan's address right now. It's $25 per book, encouraging you to buy Alan's books. I'm reminding you also that this broadcast is brought to you by you folks. And boy, Alan, sometimes I feel like we ask a lot, but it isn't asking for ourselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're not asking them to buy the books for you, but for them, right. And to help to support the broadcast. It's actually their broadcast. So anyway, back to what we were talking about. I had a thought just before we took our break. All the stuff we talk about sounds like such a downer sometimes, Alan. Uh-huh. And I you know what, remember I told you I'm reading novels, a series of books that I had read sometime past about ancient people. The one I'm on right now is about the Cahokia, Illinois mound builders.
Yeah.
And they weave the story. There's a huge bibliography at the end of it. So, you know, there is probably some history interwoven into the novel, but it made me think about this last night. Cahokia, evidently at that time, was the huge distribution center for all of the other tribes that lived nearby. And they got this ruler in. This is, of course, a novel. The people paid tribute to Cahokia to keep trade going, Alan. The traders that came in. But anyway, there were people who defied this just totally powerful thousands of man's army and such and such. And they would go to the villages or to their little, where the clans stayed, and they would say, well, here's your tribute. Well, we can't give it to you because our people will starve. They'll die. Okay, fine, we'll kill you. And then there were those that defied it. And it made me think about this, Alan. We, even though they plan it so beautifully and so perfectly, it doesn't mean that we should sit back and do nothing and say, oh, well, they're so almighty powerful that there's no sense in making a phone call or whatever somebody is led to do. There's no sense in it. I have a feeling that every tiny little thing that each and every one of us do makes a difference, Alan.
Yeah.
And at least holds the plant, sort of derails it every now and then. So I guess that's what I wanted to say, that we shouldn't get to a point where we just creep and give up.
Oh, no. But that's what we do have to realize, too, that the motto that this system goes by, the ones who cause the problems, is that the end justifies the means, which means they are totally ruthless and they will do whatever it takes at all, to achieve their objectives. So we have to realize what we're dealing with, though.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And these people, I mean, it's like Tony Blair in England. He was ready to go out. The people didn't want him. Nobody wanted him. The party didn't want him.
Does this have anything to do with that memo that came forth?
Well, it's been way more than that. It's everything. It's all the lies that he told about weapons of mass destruction, the fuzzy photographs that they used to say that these were rocket launchers, which turned out to be trailers for weather balloons that Britain had sold them, you know. Lie after lie after lie. And the fact that none of his party wanted this, it was only him to go to war.
It's become public now.
And so they were ready to kick him out. And the public this week were ready to have a mass demonstration and maybe even riots in the streets over the new ID cards that they've been told they're going to get. And lo and behold, right on cue, the so-called mysterious bombers bombed London, you know.
Yeah.
Which put Tony Blair back up there on the grandstand. Oh, I'm here to protect you. We're doing all we can. As these nasty Muslims that did this. A brand new cell that we didn't even know existed, which is the biggest joke of all, you know. And it happened right on cue. You couldn't get better terrorists as friends for Tony Blair than they've got right now.
You couldn't what?
You couldn't get better friends as terrorists. If they were real terrorists, they would just leave it the way it's going. Tony Blair would get kicked out.
Oh, right, okay.
You see? And his party as well. And also the public would have their riots in the streets about the ID card. But lo and behold, right on cue, when they needed him most, the mysterious Ben Laden's group blows up a few buses and things. And this is all out the window now. We're back to war again.
Are they blaming this on Bin Laden?
Oh, yes, it was a brand new faction that they didn't know existed. Yeah. The famous MI6 that had infiltrators in every group in the whole planet didn't know this group existed. And they have millions of cameras all over London, but not one picked them up doing this.
Oh, my.
It's so mysterious. We're all amazed, yes. So it's a joke, you know.
So now Tony Blair
Uh-huh.
gets off the hook.
And the public cannot bring themselves to imagine that there are evil people running their country that would go to these lengths, kill their own people to justify a warfare.
Yeah.
That's why this technique works. That's why it works. As I say, the end justifies the means. To them, if they had to kill 500,000 people or 1 million people, they would do that if they thought it was worthwhile in their cause.
Oh, yes, they would. And, you know, that brings us back to the spiritual nature of man, and the fact that we don't know from one day to the next, Alan, what is going to happen.
Yeah.
So therefore, maybe the most important thing that we can do, and I think you said this in your own little, when I say little, it isn't, what you say isn't little, but you said it all comes down to the individual.
Yeah.
And I'm just, of course, expanding on it as I have a tendency to do, but that getting conscious of our spiritual nature, learning to listen to the voice within us, and I don't mean like, you know, we hear voices, but when we know that something we're doing is wrong, to stop it. And it doesn't matter. I mean, even if it means your job, that you say, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going in and stealing people's children just so that the human health and human services can get $37,000.
Yeah.
And
well, it's up to the individual.
Yeah.
Because it's coming down to the wire. You will find most people will go, in fact, I've done polls already after this bombing in London. That shows you how they were ready for all of this. They've already done polls to see how many people will take the ID card now. And suddenly, they claim anyway, it's now about 85%, which is about right, actually. Because study after study for the last 100 years has found that about 87% of the public will always do what they're told. And so this bombing has been good for the ID card, which is a must-be in Masonic terminology. They had it ready years ago, but they must get it through now.
So
there's only about 3% at any time who are actually awake to everything. And I mean by that fully awake. There are other people who are caught at different levels. They're part in the system, part out of the system. They're part believers still in the system. But only 3% are truly conscious at any one time. And it will come down to what are you going to do when they say, well, you know, you got to take this card, and the card is only the precursor to the chip.
Yeah.
You know.
We have a call here. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, Alan. Okay, Alan, it's Storm. I'm a frequent caller, Jackie. He is talking there. It sounds really heavy and interesting. I'm glad I caught you at the right time. First of all, Alan, I believe that Blair knew about that bomb. I believe that possibly, I can't prove it.
Storm, that's exactly what he said, honey.
No, but I believe he did it, too. I believe he had something to do with it. In other words, I think him and Queen Elizabeth had something to do with that bombing. Because
they don't dirty their hands, Storm.
Well, that doesn't mean they don't have something to do with it. They can give the orders and let somebody else do it. MI5 is...
No, you don't understand, honey. Okay. No, there are people behind the scenes giving them orders.
Yeah, but that would be the Queen, though, if you're talking about...
no, okay. Yeah. Storm?
Oh, you don't think the Queen gives Blair orders?
Alan, would you like to comment on this? If
okay.
Storm...
No, the Queen doesn't give any orders.
Yeah, okay. Well, Storm, hang up and Alan will comment on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
No, the Queen doesn't even have to have anything to do with this. She knows the agenda, and that's all that she must
That's right.
about.
She doesn't have to know the dirty little details.
Oh, no, that's all.
They don't dirty their hands.
Yeah. And Blair is the same too. You know, there's there's a worldwide agenda here. It's not a handful of people. There's many people involved in it.
Blair is a puppet.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Mind you, I mean, he must accomplish his mission too. And therefore his head would probably roll if he doesn't. Because he's been the main cheerleader for this war from the beginning. And he knows that too. And there's no one else really who's so pro-war to take his place. So he's got his keep there. And these bombings have helped him tremendously, as I say, to get back up there on center stage again.
Right.
I'm Big Daddy here to protect you.
And it doesn't mean that Blair didn't have an idea this was going to happen.
Well, I'm sure he would have forewarning.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, in fact, Netanyahu was over there because the G8 was meeting over there. And of course, in Masonic terminology, 8 is above, so below the number 8. The two circles joined together, above and below. And that's what it means. It also means money and power, in Masonic terminology. And G before 8 means gate, so this is a gateway. It's a whole language here which the public has no idea about, but all Masons understand. So they were meeting over in Britain at the time of this bombing. They were in Scotland, but Benjamin Netanyahu was over there as well in London, and he was told not to move from his room. So they knew that these bombs were going to go off.
Yeah.
So yeah, they knew. It was a must-be. They had to get the ball rolling once more. It had been stalled by public opinion, and now, of course, they can rush ahead with their ID cards. And of course, they pinpointed Iran right away, which is next on the list.
Right.
That they drew up in the 1990s.
Iran, Syria, Libya.
Yes, and so Afghanistan, Syria, then Libya, and so Iran's next. And they said they believe this new terrorist cell. This is about 5 minutes after the bombing. They believe this new terrorist cell is being kept and trained. And they're based in Iran.
Oh.
Yeah.
They didn't know who it was.
No.
Very mysterious. Never knew about him before.
Uh-huh.
Hello?
This is how all this is done, you see.
Yeah, it's how it's all done.
Yeah. That's how it's all. It's like the passport that fluttered down from the Twin Towers when this explosion of fuel, jet fuel, went off. And this immaculate passport fluttered down off one of the supposed terrorists, not a scorch mark anywhere.
Right.
And so that pinpointed who did it, you see.
Whoever you are, caller, turn your radio down.
Yeah, okay. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that the Queen Elizabeth ordered the death of some people in Ireland a while ago when they were trying to get them out of Ireland. And we know that this was like many years ago. But that's not true. The Queen can get ordered to murder and bump people off, and it has happened before. There also are some evidence somewhere that she might have caused the boyfriend that was going with Diana.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not talking about Blair, but no, the Queen, because when you're talking about
Okay, Storm, we're almost out of time here.
Yeah, but she's one of the top people of the Illuminati.
Thank you.
Of the world. She is. She owns British Petroleum. She meets at the Bilderberger meetings. She's tied in with top people with Rockefeller. I mean, she's one of the top people of the world. There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks, Storm. Any comment, Alan?
Well, the Queen doesn't have to deal with any of it at all. She knows the agenda. She knows the money side of it. She knows she's been told that this elite must always be in control of the people. The methods are irrelevant to her. It's all done for her.
Well, actually,
and as far as Lady Di goes, the reason she was suddenly called from Princess Diana to Lady Di by the press was because that's the Masonic terminology that the lady was going to die.
Oh my God.
That's in your face.
Lady Di, oh my God.
People don't even know what they read.
Well, of course not, Alan.
They don't.
Well, I didn't.
You see, so, no, it's always in your face. It's so much so that the public never see it themselves,
I think that, Storm, he listens to a lot of other broadcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And, has a tendency to take in what he's hearing as truth.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think he just quite understands that she's almost the same kind of puppet that George Bush is. She's a figurehead.
That's a fact, yeah.
She's a figurehead.
Yes.
And the people that have controlled the kings and queens and pharaohs and etc.
Yeah.
Down through the ages have the same kind of control.
Absolutely, yeah.
So she knows the agenda. She lets it happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it would be good if people just could understand that the heads of nations
Mm-hmm.
are there at the behest of the controllers.
Oh, absolutely. You know, 2000 BC, there was a pharaoh in Egypt who found out that he was not the boss.
Really?
He was surrounded by priests who decided who he would see and who he would not see, and often he wouldn't even know that people had come to talk to him.
Oh, that was what's it?
No, it was long before him. And he actually tried to jump out the window to meet people that he saw being turned away by the priests.
Oh, wow.
To find out what they were there to see him for. The priests were always in control.
Uh-huh.
And it's no different today. It doesn't mean that these elite people are not part of certain bloodlines and they're very pompous and they truly believe they're superior. They do believe they're superior. But they're not the ones that sit and plan all this stuff.
Exactly.
It's planned by strategical think tanks.
And they don't give the orders.
They don't have to.
They don't have to. We're out of our hour.
Uh-huh.
And thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight, Alan.
It's a pleasure on a very hot night.
Yeah. Well, keep cool. Have you got your fans going?
I do, yeah.
Oh, good. Well, say hello to your guests for me.
I will do.
And ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with you tomorrow night. Thanks for being here. And thanks again, Alan. Good night.
It's a pleasure.
Good night, folks.